here's one thing that came up in this whole idea and continuing the series about working from home and working, online, talking to cameras rather than people directly face to face. The thing that came up was, how do we conduct these business meetings? What's the best way to do it? In the last few months, 4 or 5 months that we've been doing this work from home bit, I find that these meetings are definitely purposeful. They are agenda driven. They are time limited, as in like you get half an hour or 1 hour, and in that half an hour, 1 hour, you discuss what it is you came there to discuss. And there's no time for small talk. There's no time for, hey, what did you do over the weekend? It's Monday, and are you all right? And I went out the other day and I went to this fine, fabulous restaurant, and it was great. And none of that. There is nothing of that. There is no small talk. It's all very businesslike and therefore probably very efficient. Everything is laid out. And I think this is very good to do, because a lot of companies pre-COVID did not maybe think it was necessary to be so organized, especially if you were not a huge process-driven, large organization. We're beginning to discover the power of digital tools. We're beginning to realize how we need to be better at presenting our argument. And so those are the kind of things and skills that we are needing to develop for ourselves. Some people had it before, and now they're finessing that, and some people are learning and coming up to scratch on that, and this is all excellent. But there's one thing that did come up, and I wasn't sure how that was being addressed, and that was about brainstorming. How do you brainstorm on a Google meeting or on a Zoom call? And if you were part of a brainstorming session or an ideation session or an innovation group meeting, you would realize that those structurally were very different from, this is what we have to process and this is what we've got to execute. Because a brainstorm by its very nature is open-ended. And the idea may just pop in from somewhere in the sky and you don't know where it falls into your head or someone else's head, and there's stuff bouncing off the walls, and stuff is happening. The muse is sitting on your shoulder and maybe whispering things into your ear. But is the muse sitting on your shoulder when you're doing an online call or an online meeting? And this is a big question. I think, therefore, we have to find a way to make this whole thing work better even in the online world. Otherwise, creativity, innovation may actually, I won't say wither away, it's going to get reduced. If it all gets so purpose-driven, objective-driven, focused. So the conversation with some people that I've been having about this went something like this. They said, one of them said to me this, he said this quite nicely. He said, when you get into one of these calls, the first thing you need to do is not bring up the agenda. We are going to discuss how to make a better mousetrap. No, that's not what we're going to be here to discuss. We're just here to meet. And we talk about maybe food, the dish that someone cooked at home, or maybe we talk about what's the best single malt that money can buy. Maybe we talk about soccer matches. Hey, the Bundesliga is back. Champions League is on, even if there's nobody in the stadium. Or you talk about a piece of music that you have just heard, the latest Taylor Swift thing that she recorded in a garage, or the latest song from Dua Lipa, or something like that, a pop band, or what's happening in the field of Netflix. I mean, they seem to be producing a lot, or is it all banked and they just brought it into the other, or did you watch that? That was brilliant. And so on and so forth. This conversation doesn't need to take very long. It's kind of relaxes everybody to get to a point where you just take a deep breath and go. And if you don't do that, you can't actually get great ideas. And that's because your mind is so full. And everybody, I'm sure, has heard the story about the English or the British professor, not English professor, the British professor who wanted to study the philosophy of Zen and went to Japan, where he met this great Zen Roshi, and he sat with him, and the Zen master said, "Come, sit, let me give you some tea. We will have a tea ceremony." And a Japanese tea ceremony takes 4 hours. It's slow, it's deliberate, it's carefully constructed. It is designed, everything in its place, even the little spoon, long wooden spoon that has the matcha leaves in it, has a name that is given by the Japanese to respect the fact that it is something that is giving of itself and being of service. So the Roshi went through all the motions of this, and then he started pouring the tea into the cup, small cup for the British professor, and it kept pouring, and it overflowed. And it overflowed onto this beautiful white tablecloth. And then it overflowed over the table and was falling onto the tatami mats on which they were sitting. And the British professor was looking on, first a little puzzled, then a little anxious, and finally, I think, a little horrified. He said, "Stop! Can't you see it's full?" And the Zen master smiled very gently and put down the teapot and said, "Exactly." He says, "How can I put anything into your mind if it is already full? You first have to empty it." That is the principle of actual creativity. Your mind has to be able to receive before it can produce. So the purpose of these exercises, a friend of mine who does fantastic theatre workshops, Bugs Bhargava Krishna, I'm sure you've heard of him. He's a great actor, musician, playwright, screenwriter, director, and a dear friend and a colleague of mine from many years ago. He used to run workshops, and he used to start by getting everybody to sit in almost in a meditation pose, and then he would just get everybody to chant Om. He wasn't religious, wasn't meant to be, but the sound of everybody in chorus, they could have sung Hallelujah, it was fine. But just the sound of everybody in unison, resonating across the room, puts everybody in a different space. Once you've done this exercise, you can then say, so we're discussing this thing about, what's the next thing we do to create a better mousetrap? So a brainstorming session is about that. It's about looking, there's this old movie, the mirror has two faces, right? So it's this face and that face. It's a mirror looking at you, looking at it. And suddenly these perspectives from different places comes alive. And you're suddenly saying, wow, what a great big idea that is. And it's almost like a flash. It's not designed. And if we can't get that into these online sessions, I really truly fear that we will not be able to get great ideas anymore. We need to have the freedom to do this. You don't have to have an agenda for a brainstorming session. You just need to have people relaxed, in the right frame of mind, and allowing themselves to be inspired by other people. And suddenly, I think you will have a huge amount of brilliance coming into the room. And suddenly it'll feel like you're actually sitting in the room with all those people. Let the ideas drop in.